Hey Ecofictologists, welcome back to the channel. I am so excited today to introduce you to my very special guest. This is Aël, and he is one of the winners of the teenage age category for the Extinction Rebellion Wordsmiths Solarpunk Storytelling Showcase Writing Competition. Congratulations, that's really wonderful.
It's actually the first time I won any writing contest. It's also the first time I write in English novel since
Wow.
that's my second language, and
Well, that's
that,
very
that that
impressive
wasn't easy.
because reading through it, I did not know that it was your second language.
Thank you.
Yes, so thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. And
Yeah.
do you want to introduce yourself a little bit, where you're from, how old you are?
Okay, so my name is Aël and I'm 17. I'm from France, so near Paris, and yeah, that's about it.
And how does it feel being one of the winners of this competition, being on all the social media, and you're going to be on the website, you're going to have your
Yeah.
story published?
Yeah, well, that feels really great, and it also feels like you m- like you made a difference in the ecologist movement.
Mhm.
But I believe it's a bit misleading since you don't need to be publicly acknowledged to make a difference.
No, that's a really good
So
point.
yeah,
You don't need to be publicly acknowledged,
yeah,
but it is nice to be publicly
yeah,
acknowledged
it's really
sometimes.
nice.
And yeah, like I said, I loved the story that you
Mm.
wrote. The story was called The Old Man and the Bird, and it's not published yet, so we can't give too many spoilers. We still want people to be surprised when they read it on the XR Wordsmiths website. But do you want to give us a little bit of a summary of your story?
Well, it's about a young bird who, driven by its own wanderlust, go out in the world and discover its beauty and discover all the improvement mankind has made, um, well, with nature and working in harmony with nature.
Yeah, and it was really lovely, and it actually had so many quite complex things in it for such a short story. You
Yeah,
had such a feeling of movement. Like you said, the bird goes out and explores the world, and he meets different people, and they're all kind of pass things on to each other. And you do have this kind of theme of cycles, right? Of cycles, life and death, and passing on the hope. And I found it a very hopeful story, which is exactly what Solarpunk is all
yeah,
about. So
yeah. That was the point, to inspire hope and to tell a story from the bird's perspective, which was well, quite challenging at first since I'm not a bird.
yeah, why did you choose to tell it from the bird's perspective?
Well, I wasn't really inspired by a human-told perspective since it's well, what's almost 99.19% of stories are like,
It's true.
and uh, I wanted to challenge myself to write stories between the animal world and us, and with two things. The first is that uh, we don't share a common language, and it's difficult to understand each other. But I believe communication is still possible, and that's what I wanted to point out.
Yeah, I love that. I did love that aspect of the story, that non-humans kind of had this way of communicating, but
Yeah,
humans, because their connection with nature was broken, they didn't have it anymore. And that the idea that if we just get back to connecting with nature, maybe we can regain some of that communication. But That's true. It's still we do have other ways of communicating. We can definitely listen. And what is science for if not trying to read the
Yeah.
the different methods of communication that nature is trying to show us? Um, how did you even hear about this writing competition? Have you been following Extinction Rebellion before, or where did you hear about this?
It's been a year and a half, for 2 years. I've been subscribed to Extinction Rebellion's newsletter,
Oh, okay.
and it was, I believe it was during the summer holidays. I was mindlessly scrolling through it, and uh, I saw the contest, and I was quite interested, and I decided to join in.
Yeah. And is this the first time that you have picked up the pen and written a story? Was this what inspired you to write, or have you been writing stories for a while?
No, it's writing stories actually a hobby I picked up like 3 years ago, 4 years
Mhm.
ago, I believe. And that was an interesting challenge to write in English and try to, participate in a contest.
Yeah, well, I think you did it very well.
Yeah.
I definitely couldn't tell that it was that it wasn't your first language. Um, but that is a challenge. I mean, I speak German, but I'm much better writing in English than I am writing in German. It's really difficult to tell the story that I want to tell with my kind of relatively limited vocabulary compared to English. So well done. um, what you said at the beginning about, you don't have to be publicly acknowledged to make a difference. That definitely sounds like the words of an activist. Are you involved in other ecological activism?
I identify myself as an activist.
Mm-hmm.
Well, since the start of the pandemic, it's been a bit of a challenge to keep up with everything. Um, but yeah, I actually did a few school strike, uh, well, 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So in March, it's usually when the strikes happen. And it's I believe it's great. It gives us great feeling to defend the cause we care about.
Definitely,
Yeah.
definitely. And if someone asked you what solar punk is to you, what it means as a genre or as a movement, what would you how would you define it? What would you say?
Well, it's a tricky question. I'd say um, it's um, it's as a genre, it's a set of rules for our imagination uh, to build a better world uh, and to explore the wonder and beauty of nature and human collaboration, and yeah, to give hope. Yeah.
Wow, that was very eloquent. I don't know if I could I don't know if I can define it like that on the spot. That was
Yeah.
that was pretty good. Have you known about the solar punk movement and for a while, or was it this kind of getting involved with Extinction Rebellion that brought it, to your attention?
Yeah, I believe it's quite funny because I discovered the world and the meaning of Solarpunk uh, well during the contest. I didn't know what was exactly Solarpunk about, so that's how we discovered it through the contest. But
Yeah.
it was quite a good surprise.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that was probably part of the whole reason for the competition,
Yeah,
definitely get people involved, but also inspire more people to learn about it, and having this feeling of hope and positivity. You don't find that in so many other places right now.
yeah,
So
it's true.
think that's my favorite thing about Solarpunk. Is just a little bit of a break from some of the negativity that we get all day. And then you can just look to the future, because if you can't imagine a better future, how are we supposed to get there, right?
Yeah.
When you learned about Solarpunk and you learned about the writing contest and everything, did you start researching other stories and other genres that include nature and our impact on the environment, or our relationship with the environment in the stories? Do you come across a lot of stories like that?
No, not really. And generally speaking, well, I was I really was into reading a lot of stories when the pandemic started. Now I'm, keeping up with classes, etc. And I was at first much more interested in the science point of view of climate change, how how uh, how the scientists discovered it, how the physics behind it. But now I like to, well, discover the stories now we tell ourselves about this crisis. And well, there can be stories of hope and other of sorrow, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we do need both sometimes, right?
Yes,
You need the spectrum, because yes, you need hope in order to keep motivation and moving forward, but you don't want to forget that it is, a
yeah,
crisis. So
yeah,
sometimes the stories about the sorrow are also very important, but a balance is needed, I think.
yeah. Balancing is everything.
Definitely a balance. But do you think storytelling has, obviously, because you got involved in the contest, you must think storytelling has some kind of power to do something and make a difference, like you said. What do you think it is about stories and storytelling that connects with people, or that might make a difference in this big crazy thing?
Well, I believe we now need stories of hope because we are past the point where scientists say it's a crisis. The public opinion has largely acknowledged that it is a crisis and we need to act upon it without really knowing uh, where we are going. And I think that's the power of storytelling and of, generally speaking, our imagination. So if we can imagine a better world, as you said, then we can make our way through it. To it.
For sure. Do you read science fiction at all?
Yeah, a little. Well, I don't read much nowadays, but yeah,
Yeah.
that was
Because
one of
that
my
sometimes people say that about science fiction, that, the advancements, the technological advancements that we've made in order to, with cars and computers and spaceships and all these things, were all because of the things people wrote in science fiction novels, and everyone, all the geeks and the nerds, they all wanted to get
Yeah,
there. They all wanted to create the spaceship and the time machine and the the hovercraft and everything.
yeah,
And it's this imagination that's what pushes advancement and society forward. So, and Solarpunk usually, yeah, it is looking towards the future, so it's speculative fiction. So why not? Why can't it have the same effect on
yeah,
society as science fiction has?
yeah. That's but I believe Solarpunk is a subcategory of science fiction in a sense that there is a scientific basis. I mean, the acknowledgement of the climate crisis, and also that well, in some from what I've heard, because I didn't read much Solarpunk to this day, um, there is usually some form of technology that would help us get there, get to a better world. Um, but the main difference with science fiction is that it's not only the technology that will get us here, it's also a human or connection with each other and with nature. And I think that's important.
That's absolutely true. It is this kind of balance between technology and
Between
nature
nature,
and society, really, right? Because there are some major changes to society that are needed before we
yeah,
can
yeah,
before we can get
yeah,
there. But also, making the most of the technology we already have, but also improving on the technology and looking
yeah.
forward. So there's definite technological advancement. So you're absolutely right. It is a subgenre of science fiction. I wonder if it'll blow up like
Yeah,
science fiction did and get a huge audience. That would be great.
yeah, that would be great.
Because Solarpunk is also a social movement, and it's also has its own art and its own music and its own architecture and fashion and everything. Have you looked into all the other aspects of Solarpunk?
Yeah, well, mostly about the architecture and the fashion behind it, which remind me a bit of Studio Ghibli's movies, and that's partly where I drew my inspiration from for writing The Old Man and the Bird. And while it also reminds me a bit of elves in Tolkien or uh, fantasy settings, and I love fantasy, and so that was a well kind of a gateway to an imaginary yet better world that well
Yeah.
it's very special.
Definitely. I love the aesthetic in Studio
Yeah.
Ghibli. Sometimes it is this like just perfect balance
Yes.
between them, and yeah, it's a very comforting place to go when I watch Studio Ghibli. And there are a number of Studio Ghibli films that I would consider eco-fiction.
Yeah.
Um Definitely. And it is a good aesthetic. And what you said about elves and fantasy and everything, I mean, elves are, when you
Yeah.
think of elves, they're the ones that, live in harmony
With
with
nature. Yeah.
nature and everything. So yeah, maybe there's some lessons to take from fantasy races
Yeah.
about how we should live. And that's a topic I love to talk about, this like interplay between fantasy um and communicating about big topics like climate
Yeah.
change or our impact on our environment and things, because I think when you read fantasy, you're naturally going to draw parallels between what you're reading and
Yeah.
your real world. So um that's I like to think about different ways that fantasy can be used to do a lot of these things. And a type of fantasy is anthropomorphic fantasy, where you have the main character be a non-human
Yeah.
species, be a bird. So you've written anthropomorphic fantasy, really. Um, and it's really interesting that you said that you wanted to highlight a perspective that is not a human's, because that we get the human perspective all the time.
Yeah.
And I wonder how different your story would have been if you'd told it from a different animal rather than a bird.
Yeah. Well, the bird was mainly used because he could fly and cover large distances in a short time, so the story will be consistent and not very long. So
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
but
true. That's handy.
yeah,
Um, do you think you're going to continue writing these kinds of stories now that you've got a taste for it? Has this
yeah.
inspired you?
I started, and I think I will continue. It's it's I love writing fiction, and while ecofiction is at the right spot between uh, well activism and my writing hobbies. So yeah, I think I will continue try to imagine more stories about us and the world that we live in.
Great. Looking forward to them. Touching on the kind of interplay between activism and writing, I've had this conversation with a few other people whether writing can be or is a form of activism, and I definitely think it is. You know, not everybody has to take to the streets
Yeah,
in protest. You know, not everybody can. So if everybody looks at their what they're good at and what skills they have, and you know, your skills, some of your skills, maybe you also like taking to the streets, but some of your
yeah,
skills obviously lie in writing, so it can definitely, I think, be used as a form of activism.
yeah. Well, stories. We use stories to share almost everything. Sometimes they're real stories, like when you're in class and you're taught us some, I don't know, science or anything. But mainly when we talk to each other, we like to share stories of what happened to us or what we want to happen. And as such, activism has a strong link with storytelling, since both can challenge what people think and lead us to well, better worlds.
Definitely, yeah, challenging what people think. And everybody does engage with storytelling in one way or another, right? And there's
Yeah,
so many different ways. There's obviously novels and written stories, but there's music and theater and film and video games. Do you play video games?
yeah.
Yeah. Have you
Uh,
seen
uh,
kind of environmental messages in any of the games that you play?
uh, well, I don't play many video games. I'm a League of Legends player, so
Okay.
no, like, well, I guess most people of my generation. Uh, and there is well, not in the game, but in the lore, in the universe around it, there is um, a few stories about the environments in their universe. There's a region called Ionia where people live in harmony with nature, and there's this big empire who wants to conquer it, and they are forced to team up with nature forces to save it. And well, there is also recently on Netflix there was the show Arcane.
Yes. Oh, I
I don't
loved
know if
it.
you
It
watched
was
it.
so good.
Yeah, it was very good. And yeah, it explores the thematics of well, mostly I believe inequalities between the two cities. And well, in the game, the city and the nation of Zone is known for all the of the chemical pollution in it. So I think that's a good way to link inequalities and the environment, well, the the climate crisis and the biological crisis.
I did not know that. For some reason, League of Legends has not popped up when I've been looking at
Yeah,
environmental topics and video games, because in our kind of community we do talk about video games quite a lot, because I think it's such a cool way to get
yeah,
people to engage who maybe don't engage with, you know, some of the other forms of communication that we're using. So that's really interesting. I might need to read into the lore behind League of Legends. I don't play, but I like the
yeah,
lore. It's like
yeah,
reading a fantasy novel.
yeah.
Okay, well, I enjoyed reading your story so much, and I'm so glad that you took the time to come on and talk to me about it. And I hope that when the story is published on the Extinction Rebellion Wordsmiths website, that that you enjoy riding the wave
Yeah.
of public acknowledgement, even when it's not necessary. It is nice.
Yeah, it's always nice.
It's always nice, and I do hope that we see more of your writing.
Yeah, well, I think if there's any more contest, I will gladly participate.
Excellent, excellent. Yes, well, thank you so much for joining me,
Yeah,
and
well, it was great.
and hopefully we'll keep in touch.
Yeah.
So that's all from me, and I will see you next week, Ecofictologists.